Hey guys, Joshua Adeptive Channel, and today what we're going to be discussing is something that I get emails on all the time, and even John Goldsmith sent me an email saying, hey, you should probably make a video discussing, should you keep your CAT engine stock? Now before I start on this, got a few things to say. I work for a Caterpillar dealership, Western States CAT, so you might think I'm biased in that regard. And also, it's your truck. You can do whatever you want. I'm just saying my opinion here, so, if you think I'm wrong, that's fine, but I'm just going to give you my opinion. Also, yes, there's an oil stain on my shirt. It's pretty much oil stains on almost all my clothes for some reason. So to cut right to it, folks, yes, I would recommend in general, keep your CAT engine stock, although it's not a 100% always, yes, it should always be a 100% stock situation. There's actually a lot of variables that go into why you may want to change a part to something that's not CAT or change programming, something like that. But I'm going to give you reasons for, in my opinion, why you probably would want to stay with a stock tune, a stock parts, anything like that. So the first one is going to be complexity. If you stick with a stock build on your engine, whether it's a C15, a C12, 3406, whatever, it makes future repairs simpler. Not meaning they're easier necessarily, but if you start mismatching camshafts, cylinder heads, piston packs, nozzles, injectors, fuel pumps, in the future, maybe you sell the truck, or maybe you're going to keep the truck, but it gets more complicated, let's say if you start having a complex issue. John Goldsmith and I have had this problem before where someone will bring something in that's been modified, whether the ECM's been reprogrammed, camshaft's been changed, they've got aftermarket mismatched injectors, and then they come to you with a very complex performance or hard starting complaint, and you sometimes have a hard time trying to figure it out because you don't know which components might not be interacting well with the other components. Now, of course, that doesn't change some basic troubleshooting. You're still going to want to check fuel pressure, stuff like that. But as far as if you get a problem, it's always easier if you have a stock engine. And you might be saying, well, I always work on my own stuff, so it doesn't matter. Well, are you always at home? If you own a truck, probably not. You might be hundreds, if not thousands of miles away and get a breakdown. And then if you're having to fix it without getting it towed back to your place, it could get quite expensive and complicated if you're not running a stock setup. Now, what about the cost? CAT parts are, I usually say they're not painted yellow, they're actually gold because they don't have the cheapest part cost, that's for sure. Now, that's not to say that Cummins and Detroit are super cheap in comparison. It's just dealer parts, of course, have a reputation for being more expensive. And of course, you can get less expensive non-CAT parts for pretty much any CAT engine. But should you? That's really your call. Only you know your finances. But a few things to consider if you are going to go with an aftermarket is fit, finish, and warranty. So it's not that a aftermarket injector may not work. It might work fine. Is it going to be balanced with the other injectors and there if you decide to replace one? Probably not as good as if you went with a CAT one, right? CAT designed the engine. The fit and finish, that's where you start getting little things that can actually turn into big headaches if you decide to go with aftermarket. One of these I've noticed is there's a company that makes cylinder heads and they claim they're much better than CAT. They've got a higher nickel content. And I've taken a few off and put a few of these cylinder heads on for different customers. And it may not seem like a big deal, but for one little thing causes a big headache, and that is the exhaust manifold stud bores. Now, the bores are actually drilled the same depth as the CAT ones, but on a CAT head, they're not fully tapped, whereas on these aftermarket heads, they're fully tapped. Fully tapped would make more sense, right? Well, not really, because by fully tapping the bore, it actually moves the stud for the head in, or for the exhaust manifold in, quite a bit, by about a ½ inch. Now, the nuts on the studs don't have a lot of exposure once they're fully seated on a CAT head, and if you move that stud in another ½ inch, actually the nut's not fully on the stud. So then you wind up with a situation where the studs are too short, so then you have to get different, longer studs, maybe from CAT, maybe aftermarket, but they're not the right ones for what the head is supposed to have. You might think that's a minor problem, but if you're trying to replace a cylinder head and your truck's down, and then you're waiting an extra day or week for studs, it can be a real pain in the butt. Now, probably the main thing with it is warranty. Of course, a lot of manufacturers give it a warranty, even aftermarket manufacturers do, but CAT has one of the best warranties, in my opinion, for their parts that is out there. And it's weird is because depending on if it's a machine or marine application or a truck, their truck warranty parts actually have a really, really good warranty, and that's because it covers contingent damage, even if not installed by the dealership. Now, what that means is, let's say you buy a CAT injector, you install it, the injector fails 6 months later, it washes the cylinder, so now you've got the injector failure, but you've also got a cylinder pack failure. Well, CAT doesn't just give you a new injector, they'll actually pay to have the rest of the damage fixed. Now, that doesn't mean that you get a full rebuild. Basically, CAT will pay for replacement of components that were damaged up to the point of the failure. So that doesn't mean if your front main was leaking, but it wiped out the cylinder, that you're going to get a front main and a cylinder. It's going to be only contingent damage to the part that failed. But that's pretty good. Let's say you buy an air compressor, for example. CAT air compressor, it locks up, it strips out the whole gear train on your CAT engine on a C15. Well, now you're talking tens of thousands of dollars of damage. That's all on CAT at that point. They are liable to replace those damaged, broken parts. If you buy an aftermarket one, they might say that it's covered, but is it? Do they have a dealer you can go to? More than likely not. Also getting paid, CAT is not going to make you write them a check and then wait for the money back. They're going to cover it up front. Now, this warranty also ties in with a good reason you don't necessarily want to modify your engine, even if it seems unrelated. So let's say you do run all CAT parts, but you have modified or tuned the ECM to a higher horsepower it's not supposed to have. Let's say it's a C15 and it's supposed to be a 475, but you've got a 625 file on there. You then listen to my advice and get a CAT water pump. You put the water pump on there and it blows up. If you've modified the ECM, CAT's more than likely going to deny that claim, even though you might say, well, what does the water pump have to do that? Doesn't matter, you've modified the engine. So that's another good reason to stay stock. Don't mess with all the components. If you want more horsepower, there's viable alternatives even within the CAT system themselves. It's not like every C15 was a 475 or 500. There's actually quite a lot of range on most of the CAT engines. You can do what they call a re-rate. C7, for example, they could basically go from 210 horsepower to 350 horsepower depending on the parts and the flash file it has. And if you pay and do it the correct CAT way to get whatever horsepower you want, it's going to be covered under warranty if any failures come up. Now I might be saying, well, CAT engines are old. What warranties could there possibly be on them? Well, let's say you just paid for an in-frame a year ago and you have the 4-year extended warranty, but you decided to retrofit it to a single turbo and change the flash file into a higher horsepower. Then it blows a head gasket out. Then you're kind of screwed at that point. You would then have modified a under warranty, factory under warranty part or engine, and now you've basically invalidated your warranty because you've modified that engine. Before we get any deeper into this subject, why don't we do a little destruction of the week? This first destruction of the week comes from Brian, and you can see this is a John Deere engine based on the green there. And yeah, that appears to be part of a connecting rod and a wrist pin. So, you know, something came apart here. And what we've got here is the underside of the cylinder head. That's not looking too good. But the craziest part is, yeah, you can see through the block. Folks, they drove this machine in with this engine like this. It actually started and still ran, believe it or not. Next one's from Michael, and Michael sent, this is a 3516 cylinder head intake off of a big old, I think he said it was a 793 haul truck. You can see it there on the left, but look at how much burned coolant is in the intake. Apparently the aftercooler had been leaking in the intake for a long time. No one knew about it, and that's what it looks like when that happens. So let's get back to work. So Josh, you're giving us a lot of examples why we shouldn't ever modify the CAT engine, and why, yes, I think that's a good idea to keep it stock. Is there ever a situation where, you know, it might make sense to go with aftermarket? There probably are some decent situations like that. Let's say your truck, the frame's rusted out, the transmission's slipping, and it drops a valve, but you're going to retire in a year. So do you want to spend $30,000 for a CAT level in-frame, or do you want to pay the shade tree guy with aftermarket parts half of that to do the rebuild. I think you could make a case probably either way. You're taking more risk with the half the amount by having it done a lot less expensive, but if you're comfortable with that risk, it might make financial sense to do that considering the value of the truck's not very much. However, if your truck has good value and you're planning on reselling it, it's usually best to keep it stock because, of course, a stock rebuild, especially one that would still be under warranty that's transferable, is probably going to sell for more than one that got slapped together by someone that may or may not have known what they were doing quite as much as hopefully the dealer would have done. Now, the flip side of that is the manufacturers. Every manufacturer states that they make the best product, of course. Aftermarket says that they make better products than CAT, and of course, CAT is the original manufacturer. They say that, well, we designed it. It's probably the best, according to CAT. In my opinion, I'd say CAT is the best. That's not to say that they don't have problems. C15 heads can crack. They used to have more valve train problems, but they make great engines. C15 injectors, for example, the EUI style ones, are extremely robust and can last. I've seen them go over 1 million miles. That's not to say that there aren't an aftermarket one that could possibly do that, but CAT literally spends millions of dollars constantly improving and designing things for their engine. Now, if you think an aftermarket manufacturer that makes a head to fit on a CAT machine spent as much in research and development and tooling to produce it as CAT did, you're probably wrong. So always when they say, oh, it's better than OEM because it has such and such more lead, nickel, whatever in it, is that really true? Do you really think they spent as many millions on research and development as Caterpillar did? I would say probably not, but that's kind of my discussion, if you want to call it that, on whether you should modify your CAT engine or not. So in general, I'd say no, don't do it, but there could be instances where maybe it makes financial sense to, but in general, let's keep it stock, folks. Thanks for watching.